Fast and Furious 8, The Fate of the Furious. Before I get into like what I liked and disliked about the movie, there's a conversation I want to have about what has happened to this franchise going back to the very beginning and how we got here. I want to discuss sort of the suspension of disbelief aspect from the prior parts of this franchise until 8 because there is a stark comparison. Because I mentioned that Fast and Furious 5 sort of began this new era for Fast and Furious movies. Really, this one also begins a new era, not just because there's no Paul Walker, but because the suspension of disbelief that you have for the movies from here on out is extremely elevated. And really, it started in 7. Movies 1 and 3 were car enthusiast films. The second movie and the fourth movie were also car enthusiast films, but you also had that underbelly with the drug lords. And yeah, I know the Yakuza was in 3, but it was really more of the racing was more of like the icing on the cake on a deeper story. Whereas 1 and 3 were really focused on the racing. And then 5, I thought was the perfect balance. The reason why I think 5 is my favorite is not just because it was the perfect balance, but because it was just a badass movie all around. The stunts and the big set pieces were believable. Yeah, some of the stuff is a bit more over the top, and could they really get a giant safe away in 10 seconds? Probably not, but or 15 seconds or whatever. But it still had a sense of believability. With 6 is where they started to kind of dabble in it, and then with 7, you had head-on collisions at 200 miles an hour, and both parties are not only not dead, but they're still fighting on foot. You had Vin Diesel stepping on the roof of a building and having the whole thing collapse under him. See, now the reason why it's changing for me is that now what we have is we no longer have over the top situations with the environment. Like, cars changing the laws of physics or people jumping from one car to another and landing on windshields and using cars to break their falls. We're past that now. Now we're getting into the territory where the human body can not only survive conditions that are unrealistic, but now we're getting to the point where it's beyond that. You see, movies like Fate of the Furious and movies like Furious 7, I grew up watching movies like this. I've seen movies that just have just as many, maybe not as well done, but tons of over the top films from people like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, Bruce Willis, Chuck Norris, Steven Seagal. These movies are nothing new. So at some point, from the beginning of this franchise till now, these characters have evolved from being just race car drivers that were really talented and knew how to drive a car, which is what they still were going up until 5 and even some of 6, to now having superhuman power. Like, that's where we're at now, y'all. Now we have situations where human beings are doing things that are illogical. And the problem with that, there is an issue with that I want to discuss, is when you have human beings that are doing things that are so over the top unrealistic that you just kind of shake your head. Like, at one point you can laugh about it, but at another point it takes away from the drama. And the issue is, had the first 4 Fast movies not existed, obviously the franchise would not have its ground to be built off of, but had they not existed, these latter movies, these previous 4, would have actually made more sense, because they could have just said that these characters are enhanced, like with super serum, which is what we're going to get in Hobbs and Shaw, or they were special ops. Like, here's the issue, is we literally have people who are very talented at driving fast, very good, great reflexes, but now they've got superhuman power. As much as I love the moment in Furious 7 where Paul Walker like slid down with Tony Jaa the steps and all that part, like, that was awesome. But my God. Okay, but then we have in Fate of the Furious. And apparently in F9 it actually goes even more beyond the scope of realism. But in Fate of the Furious, this movie we're about to talk about right now, directed by F. Gary Gray, great filmmaker. I don't think this franchise, same thing with Furious 7, I don't think this plays to their strengths, to be honest with you. I think F. Gary Gray and James Wan are both really good directors. I think that with Furious 7, and now that I understand more about what happened, they had to do last minute rewrites to the script, and so the movie became a mess. I actually didn't like Furious 7 as much as I wanted to. 5 is still my favorite. I like 6 more than 7. And I like Fate of the Furious more than 7. I know that's going to be a difficult thing to understand. I do think that 7 had that really emotional Paul Walker, really emotional, really tasteful Paul Walker tribute at the end. Like, that was powerful. And I do agree with a lot of the fans that 7 should have been the last one. But really, in some ways, 5, without post-credit scene, was kind of the real culmination of the franchise. That's when they hit their peak, because everything still was realistic enough that I could buy into it. Now, as the films have progressed, Ludacris now knows martial arts. That's not how it was in the old movies. He was just a hacker, a car guy. Now Letty can operate military weaponry. I guess when she got her memories back in the last one, maybe she got memories back she didn't even have, because now she can operate military weaponry. Besides just being a fast driver, she knows how to use, assault rifles. Tyrese, there's a scene in Fate of the Furious where Tyrese Gibson, Roman, again, very talented driver. He literally, I don't even know how to describe this. He is in ice and he basically shoots down 3 guys. Boom, 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 and doesn't even miss. He has the marksmanship of someone who's been trained for their whole life. These movies are supposed to be about a ragtag group of race car drivers that are all friends. They have a bond. And they go out there and they do extraordinary things because of their reflexes and skills driving vehicles. But now, we're way past that. These are not Navy SEALs. These are not Marine Corps. These are not highly trained assassins. They're not mafia members. They're not like Interpol. Like, they're not a bunch of James Bonds. But yet, now in this movie, they're becoming Gary Stews. And to be honest with you, this Fate of the Furious movie, one of its biggest drawbacks, and I'm going to explain why I liked it more than 7 in a minute. I think 7 had a messy script. And again, it wasn't their fault. They had a terrible hand dealt to them. I liked a lot of 7. I'm not saying I didn't, but the over-the-topness kind of took me out of it. But now in this movie, Dom Toretto specifically is becoming a Gary Stu. And unfortunately, when a character becomes a Gary Stu, when they're smarter and better than everybody else, it takes away from the drama. Because in Fast and Furious 1, in The Fast and the Furious, Dom Toretto hits that truck at the end of the movie. He's all cut up, bleeding, barely even alive. In this movie, this man is driving a car through Havana. It has to be at least, and I'm being very conservative here, at least 150 miles an hour. He jumps out of the car, rolls on the ground, the car goes over, and the car's on fire, by the way. I should mention that. Gets up, not a single scratch on him, and he's wearing a sleeveless shirt, by the way. Nothing on his arms, he's fine. Then at the end of the movie, near the end, he puts one over on the villain of the film, and the way he does it is so incredibly convenient and so unbelievably, you have to really turn off your brain for it to make sense. Somehow he's able to contact the Shaw brothers' mom, which he did, explain everything to her, contact his friend from Cuba, the 2 Puerto Ricans from Fast 4 and Fast 5. He brought them back, Don Omar and Tego. They're actually singers. Brought them back for a cameo, which was cool. And I'm just like, there's just no way. And again, if this were like Tony Stark, right, okay, I can maybe buy it. If it was one of the Avengers. No, they are literally becoming superheroes. Literally becoming superheroes. And unfortunately, when you compare it to the rest of the series, the earlier movies, it just doesn't fit. Like, it literally does not fit. You don't get tougher as you get older. I mean, in some instances you do, but not tough enough to survive what these characters survived. And yet I still enjoyed this movie because it did feel more focused. It did feel, again, the Paul Walker element really hurt F8. I'm sorry, F7 big time. Furious 7. They should have ended it there. This one, what hurt this movie, which we didn't know about, was the fact that Vin Diesel and The Rock had a falling out, and they're in no scenes together. It's clever editing. They are in no scenes together at all in this movie, and that kind of hurt. Like, they have scenes where they're in the same area, but they're not on screen together because of the falling out that they had. But to me, this was a better movie because at this point, it was almost like my brain just said, fuck it. Like, my brain ran out the door and said, all right, if this is what we're going to get, let's at least have a good time. And because of that, I did have a good time. But there are some nitpicks about this movie. First of all, Fate of the Furious, F8, movie came out 2017. It's the last movie written by Chris Morgan, who had done 3, 4, 5, and 6, and 7, and this one. First one and last one probably by F. Gary Gray. Talented filmmaker. I guess James Wan didn't like the reshoots. Justin Lin would come back in F9. But this movie, man. Okay, first and foremost, let me talk about some of my nitpicks, and I'll tell you what I liked. Luke Hobbs, is a completely different person in this movie than he was in the last 3 films. When they made The Rock act all goofy, right now, here's the thing about The Rock. If you know anything about The Rock, you know he can do anything. The Rock can play anything. Comedy, action hero. He can do drama stuff. Like, he's mostly in the action genre, but he can do anything, right? In this movie, the opening scene with him doing the Samoan dance with the soccer team or whatever his daughter's on, him being the coach, it's like a completely different character. Hobbs from 5 and 6 was all business. Hobbs from those movies was just a complete, yeah, he had some catchphrases, but he was all business. Here we have it's like comparing Arnold from Terminator to Arnold from Jingle All the Way. That's what we're getting, but it's in the same franchise. You understand what I'm saying? It's within the same franchise with the same rules. And they just change the rules in every movie. Man, he's weird in this one. Also, some of the stuff near the end, the convenience of things, the final sequence where The Rock pushes a torpedo. Now, again, if I had gone into this film and not had my brain run out the door, I would have completely shat on that because it makes no sense. But yet, The Rock and these action movies, I've seen Commando. I love Commando. I love movies like this. So because I love movies like this, I'd be a hypocrite to say I didn't like it. I'm just saying within the context of that universe, which is supposed to be the real world, it just, 5 is where it 5 was, like I said, Fast 5 was the perfect sort of, gray area. They if they had stayed in that mode for these films, I wouldn't feel so conflicted. But they don't. They get more and more and more over the top. Now, what I did like about Fast 8, well, okay, before one more thing, one more nitpick. The part with the cars, how they all were hacked or whatever with the CPU. Why couldn't they just hack the limo they were trying to go after? Like, that was weird. She's the best hacker in the world. And that's not how it works, by the way. You can't hack the computer of a car to make it drive by itself. However, with the way that AI's been going in technology, this movie would have actually made more sense in about 10 years. Because we are going to get there. We're already there kind of now, where we're seeing cars that's like self-driving cars. But to this degree, to where you're seeing multiple self-driving cars on the road, maybe in 10, 15 years, maybe sooner, maybe later than that, but I'm going to give it about 15 years, we're going to see self-driving cars all over the place. If you know anything about tech, you know what's going on. So I could buy that. But a chip is not supposed to turn a car on. So while I liked that the movie tied Elena back into the plot and this, illegitimate son of Dominic Toretto, which was teased at the beginning of the film, I liked the aspect of that. The timeline is a bit wonky for me because they haven't really explained when these movies take place. They sort of have, but not really. And I already talked about how strange Tokyo Drift and Fast 6 is and Fast 7, how they kind of take place around the same time. Very weird. Not around the exact same time, but roughly the same time. There's only one way that illegitimate baby would be as big as he is, and it's not during the time of this movie. It's not. That baby is either too young or too old, depending on how you want to analyze the timeline, because there's just no way that. And also the idea that Elena wouldn't have reached out to him sooner. She's like, "Oh, you were on your honeymoon. I was going to tell you." Well, no, the baby's clearly not like 1 year old. The baby's a little bit older than that, and a lot of this, it's head scratching. It really is very, very head scratching. Also, Scott Eastwood in this movie, I guess he's there to kind of replace Paul Walker as being like the handsome white guy. Because, the movie's got a lot of diversity. But I don't think people give it they're trying to do diversity purposely card too much because it seems more natural. You've got like two black guys. Now you have a black woman from the UK. You've got the Asian dude who's not in this one. They explain why in the last one. And three. You've got, the Jewish girl who's also not in this one. But I'm saying they always try to throw in a different kind of, Letty's, I guess she's Mexican, but I'm not sure if she is Mexican in this universe. I don't know. But you got the Ricans there, of course. The Cuban guy, they're all like helping out. But what I was going to say was the Elena thing, it's unrealistic to believe that she would not have told Dom, with how much he appreciates family, that she would have kept that from him for more than like a few months. I just don't buy that. In fact, when she got pregnant, and that's 9 months of pregnancy, she should have reached out to Dom and told him. It's very shoehorned in. Now, the good about this film, when you sit back and try to swallow all that, the over-the-topness of it, to me, makes it a bit more fun. I actually thought the reveal, even though it didn't make any sense, the reveal of the Ricans and the Cuban guy helping out Dom, I thought that was very clever, even though, again, he's a Gary Stu because, he's able to outsmart the villain who's really smart. I thought that was good. The killing of Elena was tragic. I was just like horrified when that happened because I wasn't expecting that. And when Dom does get his revenge at the end, it feels very good. The introduction of Cipher. So prior to this movie, the Shaw brothers, Owen and Deckard, were my favorite characters and my favorite villains of this franchise. They were both just totally badass. The cruel accent, like these guys were just killers. You know what I mean? Cipher is now my new favorite villain, played by Charlize Theron. Charlize Theron is like a multi-award winning actress. And she's in here on this like flying airplane thing throughout the entirety of the movie. And she doesn't even get to interact with anybody but like Vin Diesel. And that's, could have been better. Could have been better done. The idea also that Dominic Toretto could see in Deckard Shaw's eyes that he was a good guy, that he hated Cipher and all that, is the reason why he trusted the mother. How did he even know about the mother? There's just a lot of things, man. He is the total Gary Stu in this movie. Total Gary Stu, bro. And now we're going down that pathway. Then, but I was talking about the good. Okay, let me get back to the good. The fact they went to Cuba, my home country, that was awesome. That I have not been to Cuba in the 2010s. I haven't been since the 90s, but seeing it was just great. Like, and they actually shot in Cuba. I think this might be the first like American movie to ever shoot in Cuba. It might actually be, and that says something. At least in decades, probably. So that's kind of cool. Kurt Russell, over the top, awesome, classic character. Is what it is. I mentioned Charlize Theron as like my new favorite villain because she's just cold. Like what makes her so awesome is Theron's performance. Like her eyes are so cold when she's talking to Dom and threatening to kill his son. Like her eyes are cold. You know what I mean? Like lifeless eyes. Like she looks like a psychopath, and she is a psychopath in this movie. She does not care about anything but power. The whole plot of the movie revolves around her trying to get a nuclear sub to basically start World War III. I mean, this is really over-the-top stuff here they're trying to do. And that's who she is. That's who she is, and she's bad. Meanwhile, my two favorite villains come back as good guys because Jason Statham plays Deckard Shaw in this movie. He is phenomenal in everything he's in. The scene with The Rock and him breaking out of the prison, was so much bullshit top to bottom and yet so awesome at the same time. It's hilarious to me. And then the scene that I popped for was the fact that Owen Shaw and Deckard Shaw both went to go save Dom's son, which I don't know. See, here's the issue. Here's the issue. Shaw killed Han. Sean killed Han in Tokyo. He killed a member of the family. As can Dominic Toretto really trust him? Like, I understand that they had to turn him good because they felt like it was more interesting, but I feel like it would be more difficult for him to trust him. And I know that the mom is involved. Like, somehow I found out about the mom who's, you know, that's something else right there. The cameo from Helen Mirren. Helen Mirren was kind of wasted, but still, like, that was an unexpected and cool cameo. But seeing Luke Evans come back to play Owen and having him alongside his brother, like, why can't we get a Shaw Brothers movie? Why can't we get them together in a film? Like, why can't we get the Shaw family together? I know that Hobbs and Shaw's family is featured in the Hobbs and Shaw film, but they should make more like that because those two are total badasses when they work together. And we find out, of course, that Cipher was behind both of them. I don't know if she's also behind Braga and every other villain in this franchise, but she's been the mastermind pulling the strings now for at least like 4 movies, and will continue to do so in 9 and 10 because she's back. Overall, this movie had a lot of problems when it came to realism, more than any of the ones prior to it. And because of that, it did kind of take me out of the movie, but I somehow enjoyed it more than 7 because I felt that it flowed better. And some of it did make sense. Like the fact that Mr. Nobody got Hobbs and Shaw, the only two guys who could track Dom, to go track Dom now, who's a villain, that made sense to me. Like, things like that make sense. But nevertheless, to me, I still hold that this series should have ended with 5. I'm still going to finish it off, and hopefully it'll have a great ending. But, yeah, within the context of the entire franchise, it just doesn't make sense that these guys are almost immortal. But again, the series is becoming very, very tongue-in-cheek, so at least it knows what it is. And that, I commend it for that at the very least. But I long for the days of the first, the first 3 movies aren't that interesting, especially if you started with these latter ones. They've got good characters, but they're not that interesting. Whereas 5 was like the peak. And I keep saying that, but it was, and I missed that movie, and I missed what they were doing in that movie, and 6 was great too. Now we're starting to kind of trend downward. The nose is beginning to slip. Hopefully they can pull it back up again with 10 and 11. I'm going to be doing Hobbs and Shaw next in this review series, so I'll see you then.